There.
This meeting is a discussion among commissioners and select presenters. Oh, am I supposed to do that first? I'm sorry. It's like only my second time doing it, Nicole. Okay. The public is welcome. Items scheduled may be moved or discussed during a different portion of the meeting based on circumstances or availability of speakers. This meeting will be hybrid. The commission meeting will have a physical location at the city and county building in the Cannon Room 335. And members of the public may provide public comment in person. Commissioners and presenters may join or participate either in person or through electronic means. You may also watch a recording of this meeting on the Salt Lake Rep Commission meeting YouTube channel. So welcome everybody. Open dialogue. Oh, I just did this. Okay, during this portion of the meeting, commissioners may raise topics and discuss current events that may impact or influence the commission's overall work, discussions, or deliberations to provide recommendations to the mayor and city council regarding the Salt Lake City Police Department's policies, budget, and culture. No action will be taken during this section of the meeting. Matters discussed during this section of the meeting may be scheduled on a subsequent agenda for follow-up. So number 3 is public comment.
We
have anybody?
We do not have a member of the public here.
Okay.
I do want to just share, and I'll share it in an email. Beverly Hawkins, who usually attends, had a few questions, and I'll send it through email.
Okay, great. We do not have enough to approve and adopt minutes. Let's see, next would be the chief, and he is not there yet.
Oh, he I just left this on there if he needed to attend, but he contacted me and his son is having his final game, so he will be here next month.
Okay.
Nate Groves is representing SLCPD, so if you have any specific questions for SLCPD, we can funnel them through Nate.
I do not. Does anybody have questions for Nate? Okay.
Commissioner Hockey,
what?
Can we go back to the second piece with commissioner comment? Do you mind if I make a comment?
No. Oh.
But
please do.
You were on such a roll. I didn't want to interrupt you until we got to the law enforcement piece. I want to acknowledge, so obviously part of our job here is to look to our police department and hold them accountable for ways that they can improve, specifically in communities of color. But I think it's also part of our job to identify and acknowledge things that are done right. And I had a personal interaction with law enforcement between meetings. My brother-in-law passed away unexpectedly in his home here in Salt Lake City, and he's in his mid-40s, and it was a surprise to all of us. And had the opportunity to go to his house where his wife was interacting with law enforcement as they were conducting their difficult task of doing a death investigation with all the responsibilities that come with that. And I just really felt like they were able to find a wonderful balance between ensuring the responsibilities that they have in a very difficult time like that, and the consideration and the courtesy that they extended to my sister-in-law and to our family. And it's really challenging to do those things and to have those conversations. And I thought these officers did a great job. And I just wanted to take a second and give a acknowledgement to a challenge that there is in law enforcement, and where I thought that having been in the law enforcement role and doing those investigations way more times than I would care to have been a part of, I thought that these young officers did a really nice job of being kind to our family and finding their professional responsibility. And I just kind of want to share that with the group. It's not specific to REP, but it does go to the professionalism of the department. And I thought they did a great job. And I just wanted to put that on the record. So thank you for giving me a moment for that, Tanya.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss. Very sorry.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Difficult times and a young family, and lots of challenges in this world, and we'll meet this one. But thank you for your kind words.
Let me know if you need anything. Okay. Okay. So we're back to item 6, discussion on recommendation to Mayor, City Council to qualify senior advisor for education position. Okay.
Yes, and Hannah's here because at the request of the chair, she had a few questions on what that would look like and if it's possible. And we have Hannah here from the attorney's office to answer any of those questions. So I'll have Hannah. Do you want me to turn it to you, Hannah? Sure. Okay. All right.
Hi, so I'm not sure if there's any specific questions from the commission, if maybe that's the best way to sort of address the topic, or.
I think Nicole had some questions.
I was telling children to stop talking in the background. But yes, I know Vice Chair Hawkins and I have talked about whether it's possible to codify the education advisor position with the mayor's office, just so that we're not having to start over every administration, having to get one on board and get one hired and restart the work that needs to get done. We have this MOU that's going to need a lot of fine tuning for a lot more years than probably for a very long time. I think it's going to continue to be a work in progress for a lot of years as more research comes out and as more data is gathered. And I'd hate for us to lose momentum by having a new administration come in, getting rid of that position, and then having to find someone else and convincing the new administration that we need that position, getting them hired and going again.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from a legal perspective, positions, we can create through ordinance various employment positions. With that being said, the role of this body obviously is in making recommendations to the council and the mayor. This body is not the one who would adopt an ordinance or even really write the ordinance. But in the sense of whether to do it, obviously there's a bunch of policy and legal considerations about how to do it. But going back to the role of this commission, the ordinance is codified now in Title 10, Chapter 6, regarding the REP and their role. And I was looking a little bit closer at the language today. So 1006-100 is the powers and duties of this commission. And I guess the question is it sort of within the scope of this body to make the recommendation, maybe is one of the questions. I don't know how familiar you all are with the ordinance. Obviously, it's relatively new, but the commission shall examine police department policies, culture, and budget, and make recommendations to the mayor and council on ways to further the goals of the commission. I don't know necessarily how we've interpreted that, and if creating a position in the mayor's office is tied to that scope. Obviously, there's some other roles of the commission, but I see that one as probably being the most relevant to this question about whether it would be appropriate for this body to forward a recommendation. It seems to me that that provision is a little bit more tied to what the police department does. And so sort of that's the question I have probably floating out for the group. But again, this is the power and duties, and those are the shall provisions. In addition, there, subsection C of that section talks about things the commission may do. So these are discretionary things, not things you have to do. And it covers some other behavior like engaging with community advocate groups and other members on police practices or other public safety matters. So I think it would just be up to the commission to evaluate the scope of the role. And if you find it appropriate, I think that it would be okay to forward a recommendation consistent with your approach in forwarding recommendations. And
I think maybe the part then is how it ties in with Salt Lake City Police Department and how it would further the racial equity work that is being done there if there was a senior advisor position codified. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I would try to articulate.
How that
How-
connection would be?
Right.
Okay, now I'm understanding that. So,
Perhaps the position that the commission ought to take is to develop a clear job description with what the person's title would be and to whom they would report, and then to make such a recommendation. I think we are a little early in the stage at this point to make a recommendation that the position be codified, unless we also have with it a job description and to whom the person would report.
Well, we already have a senior education advisor position that we recommended a long time ago, and Jennifer Newell is currently working in that position. The hope is that we would have her continue in that position through any administration for as long as she's going to be willing to work this job. But then later, once either she retires or a new administration comes on board and she decides she doesn't want to work for that administration, that position would still be in place per the code. That was kind of the hope. And she's the one who has taken the lead on the MOU and working on language. I've had several meetings with her about it, and she's talking to the police department and with the school district to see if we can revise the MOU in a way that fits with our goals and our recommendations.
Well, I agree that we shouldn't have to start all over again with the position. But I think in addition to that, we need to make sure that we know, as well as the mayor and the police chief, to whom the person is going to report and what their duties are going to be. And so perhaps that's the starting place.
So Hannah, Hannah, is well, I wonder, Commissioner Davis, if what we have already as a job description would be sufficient. It was developed with, I think Weston Clark developed it.
mhm.
And I believe he developed it based on our meetings and our discussions.
Yeah.
And sought input from the school district and SLCPD.
So having that clear line between, I think what I'm hearing from Hannah is that it just has to have a clear line for SLCPD for the REP to recommend it to come from this body as a recommendation, which we could include in like the annual recommendation that I have to put together. And that could just be an extension of that recommendation to even hire her on. Is that something that you all would want to do?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I mean, still, the mayor and the council will still have to decide. It would just be the recommendation. And then creating how it's maybe just we're working together with the subcommittee to say, this is how it's directly connected with the work that the REP is doing.
And that would just be an extension of our formal recommendation.
Yeah, the one that was from phase 1,
Yeah,
which I think I could do too, and the chair and I could look at that with the subcommittee for the school safety group can look at that.
Maybe the thing to do then is to send each of us a copy of the already developed job description with whom the person reports to, so that we can be refreshed in terms of our memory of what it says.
Okay. And then we would just do it for the formal one, Hannah, that would be okay. We just need to delineate how it's connected with the work we're doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the only requirement by ordinance is that the recommendation be in writing and it needs to be presented at a council meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, you all could write additional rules, policies, and procedures governing sort of the process you want to take, or the formality, or how you want to handle recommendations moving forward, and that's something you may want to consider at a future meeting. But in the absence of a policy and procedure, the only thing governing how you make a recommendation is city code right now, and it says it needs to be in writing and presented at a council meeting.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have questions for?
Moana, do you mind if I just make a little comment about this? I think, not to speak for the chair, but the history of this position is that I think this current use of the senior advisor for education is at least the third iteration of this position, and they come and then they, when there's a turnover, they go, and then different agendas and policies. And I think that when we get in the Wayback Machine to the first phase of this commission, when we made a recommendation for that position, we also struggled with some language about how to ensure that it remains in perpetuity. And I think that the position exists, and there's a person who works there in the mayor's office. And I think that the discussion that we need to have is, do we as a commission feel strongly that this needs to be in ordinance so that it does not continue to come and go at the discretion of leadership, although ordinances can be changed, but to put emphasis behind the continuation of this position, regardless of who the leadership in the city is or who happens to be in that position. And I think it makes sense for the continuation of that position to ensure that the city has that influence over the way our students are treated in their schools, particularly with the authority the city has over the police department or working with the police department. I think it makes sense to me, but I do think that we should consider it more broadly as a commission. And I think it makes sense to go back to that school safety committee to come forward with recommendations the way we have in the past. And what I'm hearing from legal counsel is that we have the authority to do that, but there are some stipulations on how that is done. Is that correct?
Yeah, and there's a lot of policy considerations to think through as part of that decision, that maybe, this body doesn't need to get into, but that the city council and the mayor's office may consider in how they, handle a recommendation if there were to be one. The one thing I will note, there's not a senior educator position is what I'm told. Like, that's not a standalone title. There's several senior policy advisors to the mayor.
Oh, okay. Already that exists that are codified.
No, I don't think they're codified. That's just how they exist in the structure. Like, the mayor has 5 senior advisors. And so this is my understanding, is that Jennifer's position is really just one of 5 senior advisors. So anyway, lots of sort of policy considerations regarding, you know, sort of locking in what the current vision and need from a policy perspective is today as it relates to the mayor's office and what that may be in the future. So there's a lot of those sort of considerations and conversations to be had.
Good.
But certainly the law allows cities to create positions by.
So then what probably would be our next step then, Hannah, is to have you get those policy considerations to the school safety subcommittee. We can discuss them at our next meeting and see if we can address them and maybe put them into the form of a recommendation to present here to this body for approval to be sent to the mayor.
So it wouldn't be the attorney's office that would work through the policy considerations. Obviously, we from the attorney's office, we don't develop the policy, right? We review the policy for legal compliance and we can help navigate. And I guess it's sort of just to backtrack, I don't know that this body has to dig that deep, but I just wanted to make sure you all understood that there is not really the title. What was
Senior education.
senior education advisor? That's my understanding, is that's not the employee's title. That is actually just senior policy advisor, one of 5 in the office of the mayor. So
I think so for the next step would just be us drafting up the language to recommend this and how it's directly connected with the commission. And we can do that at our subcommittee and then forward it to the larger body. And then we can make that formal recommendation written and
Yeah.
present it to the mayor and the city council is what I'm understanding.
yeah, I think
Okay.
the big role and point to make is tying it back to the scope of this body. Because this body really only has the authority to do what the ordinance allows this body to do. So, you know, sort of making your case on how that fits into the
School safety.
power and duty provision that I read to you from
Mhm.
the ordinance. So,
All right.
I'm certainly in favor of the position being continued. I just want to make sure that we know to whom the person is responsible and what their duties are going to be.
Sounds good. And I will start, so what I'll do now is I'll share a refresher of what that job was. I still have it on file. And everybody will have a refresher of what the scope is. And then for the subcommittee, in our next meeting, we can discuss what we were just talking about on what particular language we want to use and how it connects and bring it to the rest of the commission to vote on.
That works for me.
Yeah, that works for me too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Hannah.
thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. See, next is,
I think we'll have, Ashley's gonna just do a short, she's just gonna give a short update and then we'll turn the time over to Representative Angela Romero, who will be needing to lead to another town hall meeting as well. So just giving, sorry, I just updated you, Vice Chair.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Good. Good. It's so nice to see so many virtual familiar faces. For those of you who have never met me, my name is Ashley Cleveland. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Outreach under Weston in the Mayor's Office. I have been here for almost a year now, and my main duties over this past year has been really focusing on the fleet block development as it relates to community outreach and having some meaningful engagement with residents and family members that are related to the people who are on the murals at Fleet Block. I've also been trying to venture into building Indigenous relationships over the year, and then just generally helping Weston out with whatever he needs as we move forward. So pretty much I'm just here to let you know how it's been going with the families. From I want to say August until April last month, I've been engaging with the families pretty regularly. From October to March, we were having bi-monthly meetings. One meeting a month was focused on private grief support and counseling for the families as a group, so they could work through some of their trauma and how they can even have the discussion about visioning and recommendations on what they would like to see in the future. The second meeting was an art healing therapy exercise, and we also got to venture and look at case studies from the Salt Lake City Arts Council about what memorials look like in other cities and how we can, frame the discussion around what they would like to see in the future in regards to Fleet Block or other social justice conversations within the city. On April 18th, I want to say almost a month ago, they were able to draft and finalize their recommendation letter for the mayor. That letter was written from the Salt Lake City Arts Council. And it's always interesting because, the Arts Council is housing community neighborhoods, but they're also a nonprofit as well. The Community Outreach Department and the families. I'll be working with community neighborhoods moving forward to figure out how we can have better meaningful engagement and update residents on what's going on with the Fleet Block development moving forward. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Ashley, and also you're gonna come again when you're, I just want to make that preference, and then you'll give us a full overview after. Is that correct?
Yes, I have a larger presentation that talks about in depth what we were able to do. And not only that, a little bit of, discussion around what restorative justice looks like as far as practices in Salt Lake City and, what other cities have been doing in this regard.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. It's good to see your faces. Have a good night. Great work, Angela. Well, Mrs. Romero, Representative Romero, I should say.
Thanks, Ashley.
I guess it's your turn.
You're talking to me? Okay, so for those on the commission that are not familiar with me, my name is Angela Romero, and I serve in the Utah House of Representatives. I represent the current district, House District 26, which City Hall is located in my district. But as of, because of redistricting, my district moved further west. So 60% of my district now will be West Valley and 40% will be Salt Lake City. So and my district will be House District 25. Just a little bit of background. I'm originally from Utah, born and raised in Tooele, Utah. My family's from New Mexico. I like to always emphasize that because everyone thinks that if you're Latina or Latino, you came from somewhere else. And my family's always been in what we call the United States of America before the 1848 and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So I really like to emphasize that because we're not a monolithic community. And I went to the University of Utah, and I have a bachelor's in political science and a master's in public administration and a minor in Chicano studies. And I give that background just so you know who I am and what I do and my passion to social justice. And I incorporate it into everything I do, even as an elected official. And I have to make this disclaimer. I also work for Salt Lake City Corporation, and I've worked for the city for over 20 years now. So I'm going to talk about two things today. I'm going to talk one about my brother's keeper, which I'm working on with Weston and the mayor's office on. And many of you have probably heard about it. We're partnering with the University Neighborhood Partners, United Way, Salt Lake City School District, and other local nonprofits that work with youth of color. So My Brother's Keeper is an Obama administration initiative, and it's now the My Brother's Keeper Alliance. And we've submitted to the city council under my division, the Division of Youth and Family Programs. We've submitted a position for My Brother's Keeper and another initiative that we as a city are working on, so that we have a full-time person doing that. So I'm only working on that project until hopefully the city council approves our budget in the division, and then we hire someone to take on that position. But our focus will be young boys and young men of color. And we want to stay with that mission of the Obama administration. And we are going to have our first summit on June 25th at the Vivint Center. We've been working with the Utah Jazz on that. So I just wanted to give people an update on that, and to see if I could answer any questions you have, because I know we've been working on My Brother's Keeper since Mayor Biskuski's administration. And then it kind of just disappeared, and now it's reappeared. We've been talking about it for about 2 years. So my job through the city was to kick everybody's butt into gear and to get it started. So I just wanted to give you an update of where we were on that, and that we are going to, I think we asked the commissioners to sign our pledge. And from that, we're going to be doing our first major event on June 25th, and we're focusing on high school students. I really feel like it's important not to mix junior high and high school students and college students sometimes with what we're doing. So our focus will be on high school students, and it'll be specifically on young men and boys. So just wanted to give that update. And if anyone has any questions about that, I can answer them, or I can take down that question and get you an answer later, or I can switch my hat now and talk about murdered and missing Indigenous women. So does anyone have any questions about My Brother's Keeper? Or are we all good on that particular initiative we're doing with the city? Perfect. Okay. So now I'm going to put my legislative hat on. So I've served in the Utah House of Representatives since 2013. So I just finished my 10th year there. I can't believe it's been 10 years. And in 2019, I was approached by Restoring Ancestral Winds, Yolanda Francisco Nez and Moroni Benelli, about an epidemic happening in our Native American community, within our Indigenous communities. Disclaimer, I'm Indigenous as well as Latina. I just grew up with my Latino side of my family. And so that's why I identify more with that. So because of that, they approached me about running a resolution called Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, just to talk about the epidemic. And so we wanted to do the task force, but we weren't sure if we would have the support in the body. So we wanted to start off with the resolution to acknowledge May 5th as Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girl and Two-Spirit Individual, which is LGBTQ+. We wanted to see if we could pass that resolution in the legislature. So I submitted the resolution. Senator Luz Escamilla was my Senate sponsor. And what this resolution did is it just highlighted the statistics. And this is where I would disagree with, I wouldn't say disagree, but the Urban Indian Health Institute did a survey and did some research, and they identified Salt Lake City and the state of Utah within the top 10 cities and within the top 10 states when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women. Salt Lake City Police Department didn't agree with that particular survey that came out. So when we did the resolution, we didn't put that information in our resolution. But Native women are at higher rates of being murdered or going missing than their white counterparts. And I have a bunch of statistics that I can send to all of you, and I'd go more in depth, but I didn't realize I had a town hall that our staff had booked for us because I didn't cross-check my calendars. And so I'm supposed to be in the town hall now, but I told them I'd be a little bit late. And so with that, we ran the resolution, it passed. And so now May 5th in Utah is missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls plus two-spirited individuals. So I think that's the first bill to ever pass the Utah State Legislature that had LGBTQ+ in its title, which was very important to me and significant to me, because there are people that voted against the resolution just because of that. And so because we were able to pass that resolution, we decided that we would run legislation on the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girl Task Force. And we had LGBTQ+, but we took it out because they weren't going to pass the bill. And so I had to go with stakeholders and say, what do we need to do? Because we're still in a focus on everyone in our communities, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. So we wanted to make sure that we passed the resolution, the task force. So we passed the task force in 2020. And that's when kind of COVID hit. So we weren't really able to do anything with the task force. And then I had to renew the task force in 2021. So what that means is myself, and this is rare for a Democrat to co-chair a committee, I co-chair the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girl Task Force with Senator Dave Hinkins, and he's out of Southern Utah. And so what we've been doing is we've been going around the state. We'll be in Cedar City on June, I think it's 10th. And we're going to the people, because a lot of times as elected officials, we want people to come to us, and we're actually going to the people. And what we're doing is we're doing listening sessions, and we're meeting with the community with where they're at regarding whether they've experienced someone missing or someone that's been murdered in their family. And then we're also connecting them to resources, because the things that happened when we did our last listening session in Bluff is a lot of times elected officials haven't went down to talk to our Utah residents that live on that side of the Navajo Nation. And so a lot of their concerns were just about police brutality or no police at all. And so although we're talking about murdered and missing Indigenous women, we didn't want to cut off the community, say we can't talk about other issues. And so what we're trying to do, myself and Senator Hinkins, along with our, we have 9 members on our task force. I want to make sure that out of those 9 members on the task force, most were Indigenous, which are. So we have representatives from the Urban Indian Center, representatives from the Utah Attorney General's office, representatives from Restoring Ancestral Winds, and myself, and then a representative who represents the Department of Health, who's also Native, and then the Department of Indian Affairs for the state of Utah. So majority of the people on our task force are Indigenous, and I felt like that was really important, because a lot of times when we go into communities, the people sitting at the table trying to talk about racial justice or just issues that impact communities of color don't look like the populations they're trying to serve. And so we wanted to make sure that as a task force, we were truly representative of our communities. And so that's kind of what we're doing in a nutshell. I have some statistics I can send to Moana. I can read you a couple now. Hold on, let me just pull the wrong sheet up. And so this kind of just gives a background. So more than 4 in 5 American Indian or Alaska Native women, which is 84.3%, have experienced violence in their lifetime. So 56.1% who have experienced sexual violence, 55.5% have experienced physical violence by an intimate partner, 48.8% who they've experienced stalking, 66.4% have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner. Over more than 1.5 million American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. And so more than 1 in 3 American Indian and Alaska Native women, which is 39.8%, have experienced violence in the past year. So again, these statistics are alarming, and I can send these documents over to Moana. I just need to get permission from Restoring Ancestral Winds. So these are some of the reasons why we formed the task force. And then this last session, I was able to get $130,000 in one-time funding. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hire a researcher from a university institute. Wanted to make sure that researcher was Native. So I was really creative in how I put together the request. So since it was under $150,000, I didn't have to put it for an RFP for anyone to bid. Since it was under 150, it was 130,000. I was able to work with our ledge council and make sure I've met all those criteria. And then we are going to ask about 4 organizations, to university institutions, to submit an application, and then we will choose who gets that, who gets awarded that research money to do the research and work with the commission to really look at the gaps. Because right now, again, there's a disagreement with Salt Lake City Police Department and other local law enforcement about the actual number of women that have went missing, or more so missing than murdered. And those gaps are, a lot of those gaps are there because we don't identify. Native Americans are a racial group, and a lot of times they're misidentified. So what we really want to do is identify where these gaps are so we can make recommendations to the legislature, but also to the Department of Public Safety. And also Chief Brown has been working with myself and Moroni Benelli and Yolanda Francisco Nez to really address this issue in Salt Lake City. We also know that most women, Native American women who are murdered or missing or have these intimate partner violence situations, the majority of their perpetrators are non-Native men. And so again, this has to do with jurisdiction. And so jurisdiction plays a huge role in why people are missing and murdered, because anytime someone is, if depending on what the crime is on the reservation, when we're talking about a reservation setting, it involves the FBI, not local law enforcement. So it gets really complicated when you're dealing with murder and higher level crimes. And so that's something I know we're working on at a national level. But also, I like to remind people that majority of Native Americans, like myself, live in an urban setting. So we have this like stereotype of who our Native communities are, but many of us live in an urban setting. So I like to always point that out to individuals. So that's kind of where we're at as we go as a state. And I know I've been working with Ashley Cleveland here in the Salt Lake City Mayor's office to connect her to some of our tribal communities, because again, many of our tribal leaders will tell you, why do I want to work with any government? I don't trust you guys. And so we've been really trying to build that bridge and to build trust. And I think it's helpful that I'm the co-chair of the task force because I'm representing my own communities. And so they're more willing to work with me on issues. And so that's what we're doing as a state on murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited individuals. And now we're using the term murdered and missing Indigenous relatives, so we're inclusive of everyone. And that concludes my kind of presentation that's kind of everywhere, but I'm open to questions. And then I'll make sure I get some documents for you with statistics from Moana.
Sounds good. Thank you, Angela. Or Representative Romero.
That's great.
Thank you. I think that's great information. Thank you for everything you're doing. You've been busy.
We're always busy. As I was talking to Reverend Davis, it doesn't end. We're part-time, but we're really not part-time. And I decided when we had the social unrest and people were frustrated with law enforcement and we had our protests, myself and I was on the phone with actually Representative Hollins, and she's a good friend of mine, and we're our districts are neighboring districts. And I'm like, we need to do something. We need to speak out. We need to ask for peace, because we are the leaders of, and we belong to a national organization called Quad, which represents the 4 ethnic and racial groups. So we have the Native American, we have Asian Pacific Islander, we have Hispanic, and we have our Black caucuses at a national level, and they come together and they're called the Quad. And I was like, why don't we form the Quad here in Utah so that we have a purpose and we're much stronger together. There's only 7 of us that are from communities of color, but the legislature. So I'm like, let's just call ourselves the Quad Caucus. And so we issued a statement. We wanted to make sure it was Sandra speaking out because of the murder of George Floyd. We wanted her to be the face of us as the Quad Caucus, because we all lead out and all of us have to also follow our, who's leading out and uplift them. So when we did that, Representative Hollins and I got a call from the speaker, and he wanted to meet with all of us. And during that session that came up after the murder of George Floyd, they let us run with a lot of bills, and we worked with the Department of Public Safety. We worked with a bunch of community leaders, and we worked with our Republican colleagues, and we were able to pass a lot of legislation that some people are like, well, it doesn't mean a lot, but it meant a lot to us because our Republican colleagues were working side by side with us. And so Senator Escamilla and Representative Hollins were able to do the no knee on the neck. And then I was able to pass legislation where we made sure we had de-escalation training. And we also, you can't if you pull a gun on someone, you have to document it. And also just how we report certain crimes when it comes to communities of color. And a lot of people felt like those weren't enough. And I agree, they're not enough. But as policymakers, our job is to compromise. And ultimately, our goals are to change systems. And what you all are doing here now and the advice you're giving is changing systems and institutions. And what I like to remind people is that changing systems don't come overnight. So we need everyone to do their part and to play their role. And for us as legislators, our job is to make sure we make it better for our community. So sometimes it's not going to be what everybody wants, but we have to do it in intervals. And so I just like to remind people that we are, all of us that are from communities of color are all Democrat. We're in the super minority, but the things that we've been able to accomplish as a quad are significant when you look at other states. And being in the super minority, a lot of times people aren't able to pass legislation. But I can tell you the reason why we've done that is because myself and Representative Hollins and Senator Escamilla in particular have really worked hard to build those bridges with the leadership of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and we'll continue to do that because we want to continue to be that voice for all of our communities. So just know that as a elected leader and informal leader within our communities, if you guys have any concerns or questions before the legislative session starts, and maybe what we do is we meet with all of you before we start this next session. So maybe Moana, we can arrange another meeting where we can all be in person and we kind of talk about the upcoming session and just what some of your policy interests are at a state level, and working together just to make sure that we're stronger as communities when we're working together. So that's all I wanted to add before I head off to my town hall.
Before you go, I would just like to commend you and the group of 7 or so for working together to do this. Without your representation, we wouldn't have nearly as much achieved as we have. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I have to jump off into another call, but we'll see you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Oh, okay, back to me. Sorry. Moana.
Hey, Tanya, can I?
Yes, Steve.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was hoping to get the representative before she logged off, and I think
She's off.
yeah, and I think Commissioner Salazar Hall is also logged off. But I just want to throw out one of the important things that well, amidst all that important information, but one detail that I just wanted to follow up on is the disagreement in the data collection and properly identifying people by race and ethnicity accurately. And I think that is an issue that we as a commission can pay attention to and look for ways to support our department to more accurately identify people with whom they come in contact, because that issue with Native and Indigenous women and that disagreement on those numbers, some of it comes down to identification, right? And I think that we're having a similar conversation about Hispanic and Latino youth in our school safety subcommittee. And I think that there's some challenges in the record keeping with the particular a record system that Salt Lake City has, that I think everyone in Salt Lake County has, that makes it a challenge to accurately identify that. And I think maybe we should dig into that a little bit and give it a little push, because I think it's important, one, to identify people accurately, and two, it'll give us a better picture of what's going on, which can help shape our policy recommendations. So I think that was a key detail that she mentioned there that I just wanted to make sure didn't get lost in the importance of all the other work she was talking about.
I do agree. Oh, hello.
Oh,
I agree with you on that. So
yep. I think that that should be one of the policy and practice subcommittee discussions, as well as the school safety, because that's something that I highlighted as well, Commissioner Adjue. It's not just in this aspect, but we've been talking about that in the school safety subcommittee. And I'll ask internally as well, but I think it would be helpful if this commission was focusing on supporting that in some type of way so that we're all on the same page. And the collection of the data, then we can actually know who, what, where, in terms of racial and ethnic identification. So yeah.
And there's some realistic reasons why the department has a hard time identifying that, and some of it is just computer programming. But I think it's worth paying attention to and looking to see how we can improve it. So, anyway, thanks for that.
I will add that to our discussion for that. All right, I think it's my turn. Sorry, because we are having technical difficulties, I will request the chair that I share that in a meeting down the road, please, Vice Chair.
Okay, that is fine. So next would be the subcommittee chair updates. Policy and practices.
With the policies and practices, we were trying to hone in on a chair for that group, and that things like this that we were trying to figure out how the policy and practice group subcommittee could support and take on one of these agenda items. So I think we'll bring that to the next meeting. I'll have more information for you all, for the chair and vice chair, on how we can address that.
And that subcommittee doesn't have a chair appointed to it right now.
Not now, yeah.
Okay. Training.
The training committee did have a meeting earlier this month, and we decided that we're going to meet regularly on a once a month time period, and then that will be the first Tuesday, right? First Tuesday, Mona?
First Monday.
First Monday of
5:30.
each month that we will meet. And we will also be presenting some issues to the larger commission that we'll want them to take some action on. At this point, we don't have any of those so far. We did have the mayor make her presentation for a budget request, and there were two items in the budget that we had suggested that she asked for funding for, and she did. Now we're waiting for the council to either vote in favor of her budget or not. Thank you. That's our report.
Thank you. School safety.
Oh, that would have been the chair.
That's the chair. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I was in that meeting, and I can share that what they did was what they're using the meetings for now is their work sessions, and they're going through line by line of the MOU to ensure all of the recommendations that you all made in phase 1 are being thoroughly looked at in the document. And then Jennifer Newell we'll probably have her come here and talk about that, but she's been meeting with all of the different stakeholders and even community members, including this group, the subcommittee, to be able to draft that up.
Okay, great, thank you. And application review?
So for the application review, we just had those, there's 3 that are in process. There's one that will be taken to the city councils we voted on, so we'll finally have one. We're going to transmit that should be this week. And then 3 that we're still looking at, 2 of which are young folks. So hopefully, right now at this point, it's more of the process of the, so sorry to all of you, but I will let you know when it's official. and we transmitted. It's just the process in getting their names to the city council that's just being held up. So thank you all for your patience. Hopefully, in the next month or so, we can have a full commission.
Thank you.
What will we do?
And then we can't have a closed session, so I believe that's it then. Am I,
Can I make a couple of other comments regarding the training commission? One, the training commission is really concerned about these park rangers. We have them authorized now, but we need to ensure that they're going to be safe, they're going to be adequately trained, and so we're working on that as a issue that will come up before the training commission.
And-
Second, question, comment?
Oh, just real quick, I just got an update in an email, Reverend Davis, about that. So they just hired the supervisor and we will have a update for you all. They
Great,
asked, can
great,
we
great,
meet with
great.
you on the next meeting?
Great. And the police department, the second issue is the police department has appointed and assigned a lieutenant or captain that will be working with us, and we will stay in touch with him as well as the rest of the training department. So thank you.
thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. And I believe we are done for the evening.
Great. I move we adjourn.
I second.
And it's official.
That hammer down, Steve. I love it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Good meeting, everyone. Maria, it's nice to meet you.